going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. This is our weekly show where we review the Magic stories. And this week, because why not, first of all, we're back for more Kaldheim.
Yes.
And this is probably the only episode for Kaldheim, except for maybe the last one, where we're only going to be reviewing one story. We also had the bonus episode this past Saturday, so if you missed that and you only check in on Thursdays, you should check out this past Saturdays as well. But today we have only one story, and it is one of the shortest stories we've probably ever reviewed in the history of JaAR. And yet, for this set,
the one that we decided to do in a standalone episode.
Well, you say decided like it was a choice that we had, based on wanting to get these out as soon as possible for all of you, as well as for ourselves.
In a somewhat sensical manner.
Yes, this is how it ended up working out. So, we have a very short story to review, but you can probably tell from the time code down below, even though we don't know how long this is going to take, it's probably not the shortest JaAR we've ever done. But, regardless.
It might be.
We are here for episode 3 for the Kaldheim main stories, called the Saga of Tibalt. All of these stories, this one obviously included, are by Roy Graham with contributions from Jenna Helland. My quick review at the top is, this is a very short story, and yet it's incredible, and so you should absolutely read it. The symbolism involved, it's just very, very good, and I encourage you to read it before watching this video. Amy?
All I want to say is, this is the kind of shit I love. I love short stories, and I don't mean stories that are short, I mean short stories. Mm-hmm. And this really was that. Mm-hmm. And amazing writing.
Yeah.
And the art that is in it is also incredible.
Yeah.
So, definitely read it, and then come back here.
Yes, because as we say with these mainline reviews, we review, we don't summarize. And so we would like you to be able to read the words of the text and then come back here, listen to our opinions, and give your own down in the comment section below.
Yes.
For anything that you either agree with, disagree with, you want to join in the conversation, that's what the comments are for. So, on to the full review itself. First of all, story starts with an amazing opening monologue. Mm-hmm. I was saying to Amy, typical stories that we have read in the past and that we will probably read going forward many, many more times, start with the typical, you hear about a character, you hear about where they are, and you get a lot of description in terms of where they are, like in-depth descriptions of the rolling fields and what the mountains look like and the smell of the air, and there is nothing wrong with that. Tried and true, that is how you set up a setting. This story did not do that. It started with an opening monologue from a devil planeswalker,
right,
which was very, very good. And in addition to the, flowery nonsense that he was spouting, he also had time to still give us tiny tastes of the fact that we're on Kaldheim, reminding you what Kaldheim is all about. So saying things like talking about the world tree, the branches of the world tree, talking about being on Immersturm, talking about how cold and nasty it is everywhere else but on Immersturm, and then mentioning that the realm is lousy with storytellers.
Right.
All of that stuff is very Kaldheim specific. It even harkens to Norse mythology in general, so it reminds you that that is what Kaldheim is inspired by. And it was all in an opening monologue that was still like, hey, I'm going to burn this place to the ground. Isn't that great? I'm a devil is what I do. And so it wasn't the formulaic, here's a person, here's the setting, here's a full description of it, get a picture in your mind. It was like a pretty awesome monologue to start everything out.
Yeah. I liked the monologue a lot.
Yeah.
It was a little bit tropey.
Yeah.
It's a little bit tropey, but that helped a lot with how good the story was. The fact that it used Tibalt's point of view when describing where the hell we were. That just, it really brought a level of I don't know, whimsy to the story
Sure.
that a lot of the other ones just don't bring.
Sure.
Like they're just a little bit too textbook-y.
Well, and it's interesting to me too, because the next note I have to first things to talk about is that we go from the italicized text of the opening monologue to then regular font that has like a narrator talking about Tibalt and the world that Tibalt's in and what Tibalt's doing. And like, you know, our story begins with Tibalt and this happens, but you read this and there's no way that this is just any narrator. This is a narrator that either is Tibalt, has been influenced by Tibalt, is in love with Tibalt, something to that effect, dripping with bias towards Tibalt. Because in the first paragraph alone of this character talking,
in love with Tibalt, it just is Tibalt.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It might be, but it's talked about of like the first part of our saga starts with the Planeswalker Tibalt. So either it's Tibalt speaking in the third person and telling a story, right? Or who knows? But I wrote some of the things that, you know, talking about one of his many talents, or being aware of his many talents. Mm. Handsome and powerful Planeswalker. Mm-hmm. Talking about the monster, calling it a hideous, stupid monster. Right. And then, what was the last line? Wise and mighty Planeswalker in Tibalt. So, again, yes, I agree, it's probably just Tibalt. Right. But regardless, no matter who it is, this narrator is not an unbiased narrator, right. And by any means.
And they were very blatant about allowing us to realize that the narrator is biased.
Right in the first paragraph, and then it like mellows out a bit, because it actually just describes Tibalt's actions for a while, and then towards the end it kind of kicks back in terms of like, you know, let me tell you how this story is going to end. Tibalt's gonna do all these things and kill all these people, and so like, you know, that's when it jumps back in, and you're like, oh right, we can't trust a damn thing you say. Got it. Which reminds me of, which core set was it? Was it 2019? The one where we had the storytelling of the twins mirrored with Bolas and Ugin from when they were younger. It was like the flashback stories.
Yeah.
And we had that one story that was really, really good from them. We reviewed it, so you can go back and watch those for yourself. But where they talk about where one story is told from Nicol Bolas's perspective. Mm-hmm. All the others have been told from a narrator's point of view. And then one was told from Nicol Bolas's perspective, and it embellished so much. Mm-hmm. But in the same point that it embellished and probably lied about a ton of things, it also clued you into the fact that, oh, all those other stories that we read, though, were probably passed down from Ugin's perspective. Right. So who knows that those stories are any more reliable than Bolas's. Bolas's is wildly ridiculous to believe, but that's because we all know the story that we heard prior to that, which is drastically different from Bolas's recanting of it. So, you know, there's one person's story, the other person's story, and the truth. That's a similar situation here where this narrator is not an unbiased narrator. And so you got to take some of this with a grain of salt. Again, I tend to believe the facts, the information stated as fact, which is that Tibalt went to these places, told these people these things, and gathered these items for this reason, right? But again, in the end, where it's like, well, the story's going to end by Tibalt doing all these things. Who the hell knows? But I still tend to believe that we know he has the sword, right? Because we saw that in the earlier stories. But so the fact that he used them to travel from plane to plane and manipulate all these different people, I tend to believe that despite the lack of trustworthiness of the narrator that we've seen. And I guess we will hopefully learn more about that as these stories go on and as we read them going forward. Also, speaking of past stories from this set of stories, when we last talked about the mainline stories last week, we talked about Tibalt being Valky, appearing as Valky. And what we were saying is it was unclear at that point whether Valky ever existed or if Valky was a creation of Tibalt. Did Tibalt capture Valky, kill Valky, trick Valky in some way? Were they working together? And that's why Tibalt was dressed up as or disguised as Valky? And now we have that answer, but a week later, which is awesome.
Right.
Where we find out that, in fact, Tibalt tricked the god of lies, or whatever, the god of mischief, and the trickster god, which is ironic, but also kind of makes sense, because we've seen planeswalkers messing with godlike figures for a very long time in all these different planes, and it's kind of the dichotomy of our planeswalkers used to be gods in action, maybe not necessarily in title, but definitely in actions, and now we're seeing that they're still kind of like gods now because they can get the better of gods often. And so isn't that in and of itself
I don't know
just
often?
Okay. I just don't know of many instances where a planeswalker has been gotten over on by a god as opposed to the other way around.
Well,
like, I guess Elspeth, right? Originally.
Yeah.
But that's because
how many
Elspeth was
gods are
super...
really trying to do that. Like, you know, like, motivation plays into that too.
I guess.
You know, if the gods are just, you know, I mean, think about the Amonkhet gods. They're not like...
I mean, when they became Eternals, they were.
Well, yeah.
And Nissa was able to get the better of Kefnet when she went through Kefnet's trials. And Gideon was able to put up his barrier when Hazaret tried to spear Jeru. Gideon didn't die to Erebos. I mean, all of his familiar... God, what the hell are they called? Damn it. Irregulars.
Irregulars.
Ha! Got it. Thank you.
They need some Activia.
All of his irregulars died, but he didn't. So again, and he wasn't even, like, that was when his spark ignites, but was after that, but before that he wasn't a planeswalker. So, again...
But in that scenario, Jamie Lee Curtis is the one with the power.
Wow. Still going with that. It was a very good joke. I will not lie to you. It was very, very good. I was going to continue trying to make my point, but I like the joke nonetheless. No, regardless, that's what I'm saying. Like, a lot of times when we've seen gods, we've still seen planeswalkers getting one over on them. Okay. Again, Elspeth seems to be the exception to the rule, except that, one, Elspeth then escapes the underworld, defying Klothys anyway, but also the fact that Elspeth, like, trusted Heliod. Right, and that it wasn't like Heliod. It wasn't like Elspeth was actually hostile towards Heliod. Where, who knows how that would have gone? Because Elspeth had God's End, which took care of Xenagos in God form. So I guess who knows? Let me know your thoughts on that. I'm curious. You know, let me know in the comments. Do you have other examples of gods versus planeswalkers that I haven't brought up? I feel like that's a common theme. Is that, like, we go to a plane where gods are visible beings, tangible beings, and whenever a god goes up against a planeswalker, the planeswalker seems to come out on top 9 times out of 10. But anyway, so yes, Tibalt was able to trick Valky, imprison him in Karfell with Narfi, whom we know as one of the characters from the cards, and then takes over the guise of Valky to go out and enact the rest of his plan, which includes going to many different places. Cole the Forge Master goes and sees Cole first, who is one of the few, if not the only, who can work with Tyrite, which is hardened sap from the World Tree, which he was able to turn into a sword, which he was going to give to Halvar, God of Battle, but he didn't, because Tibalt tried to get it as Valky, wasn't given it, killed Cole in his own forge, took the sword for himself, and that's how he had the sword that we saw in the last episode.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, it's really cool, it answers our question of how did he get it, which we'll get more to this at the end, but I'm glad that they answered that question so quickly because they don't have a lot of real estate episode-wise to work with. So I'm glad that it's not a question that we had last week and it's not going to be answered until 2 weeks from now. So 3 weeks from when that story came out. Because that would be kind of annoying. I mean, I guess it would be fine, but I like that it was answered because there's still more to do. We still haven't seen a Doomscar yet. Or the Doomscar occur yet, even though that's definitely where this is building. One way or another, whether it actually happens or whether it's foiled before it occurs, that's where we seem to be going. So, but yeah, then Tibalt goes to Skemfar and talks to Harald, the king of the elves.
Yeah.
The guy who unified the elves, manipulates them into thinking that they have to fight, goes to the Frost Giants in Surtland, goes to the Skell clan in Bredegard, and tells them that they could get their Demon Master Varagoth back. Like, all of these people, Tibalt is going to, presumably learning about beforehand, and then manipulating them however he has to, or however he can. And I appreciated...
It's fighting war. It's a thing.
Right, exactly. And then plans to start this Doomscar. I liked the dichotomy of, in the beginning of the story, we find out that Tibalt is doing all of this, one, for himself, but again, that may just be his excuse. Like, oh, I was going to do it anyway, so it doesn't matter that somebody's making me do it, because I was just going to do it anyway. But this horrible beast, and I put that in air quotes because it was capitalized. Horrible and beast were capitalized.
It was his interpretation, or at least the interpretation that he wants you to have.
Correct.
From him telling you about it.
Correct. So, but this horrible beast was able to afflict him with a poison, which the horrible beast called a seed. And then the language... It's semen, yes. He gave him his baby, and Tibalt is going to give birth soon. That'd be terrifying. But we then... Tibalt later calls what he's doing to all these different places, like Skemfar and Surtland and Bredegard, etc. He says that he's going there and sowing seeds of war and chaos. And I just thought that was very interesting that he had a seed sown into him, and so then he went out and sowed seeds, although they arguably have nothing to do with what... Like, he didn't pass along the poison.
Right.
Although, I guess you could argue that propaganda is poison,
It's
you know?
a parallel.
Yeah. Propaganda is poison, and trickery and manipulation is poison. And then again, just the whole idea of this whole story being the saga of Tibalt, being something that we have no idea what of this we can even believe.
Right.
Which is so great. Because
It truly just means he is Valky. So it's fine.
yeah. He could easily play the part because, he's a devil, right? That's kind of what they do.
Yeah.
And then I guess the last question I have is, we hear about the horrible beast, but that's all we hear about it. Is that it sowed a seed in Tibalt of poison, and it will only remove it if Tibalt does what the horrible beast asks, but Tibalt was already planning on doing stuff anyway, so I guess I'm curious who the horrible beast is.
Yes.
By the way, I didn't mention the Coma, the Cosmos Serpent, going to the Valkyries was also because of Tibalt and because of the sword, which ties into Nico's story, which was the bonus story or the bonus video that we did this past Saturday. So again, check that out. But yeah, it was like, I'm curious who this horrible beast is. Because from the card previews and stuff that we've seen, it leads me to think that it is the wolf, right? The Realm Devourer wolf. Except, how would the wolf have inflicted Tibalt with a poison and then told him that it was a seed and then told him that... I mean, maybe the wolf talks, right? That's not outside of the realm, no pun intended, of possibility. But how would it have
I would doubt
afflicted him
it.
with a poison unless it was like on his
Yeah,
fangs or something?
It sounds like it's a more humanoid creature.
That's what I'm saying. So then I have truly no idea who it is. You know, for like a half a second I was like, oh, it could be Garruk, but that's not really where we're going. I don't know. It's very odd to me, and I'm curious where we come out on that. Like what happens then, or what we find out next.
Right.
Because that will be good information. And then we find out that Tibalt wants to kill Kaya. That's not a surprise based on when they interacted with one another previously. We also kind of know, if you saw the Saga story spotlight, how that works out with Kaya now, based on previous stories, teamed up with Tyvar. I almost forgot his name.
Yeah.
Kaya teamed up with Tyvar going against Valky/Tibalt. Who knows how it will come out? Again, if you have not been following the card spoilers, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there is a card that spoils that resolution, so if you end up playing the cards, you'll see that in a Saga if you come across that card. So
don't play the card.
Don't ever play Magic! Just come watch our streams of Magic every Monday night. We have been doing really well on our streams, not even necessarily win rates, just having a lot of fun. We did pretty well regardless, but we're having a lot of fun, so we encourage you 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, Monday nights, right here on this channel. We encourage you to join us.
Every week.
Yes. Every Friday as well, 8 to 10 p.m. We also stream video games, not necessarily, or definitely not Magic the Gathering Arena. Arena is only Mondays. But still, we hope that you'll join us for both of those.
Yeah.
Subscribe and ring the bell.
We're currently playing Marvel Avengers.
Yeah. And I finally got in the groove after like 6 weeks of the game, but I did really well this past week. So I'm looking forward to, I guess when you're watching this, I'm looking forward to tomorrow night when we play this.
Yes.
When we play that game and see how we do. That's kind of, I mean, what else was, it was a short story.
Short story.
Yeah.
And it was so good. Like I said, it was its own short story. It wasn't contingent on the story before it and the story after it. So you got to read that story, and it was a great story on its own, and there's not a lot to say about it.
So let me ask you a question then. And this can be posed to anyone who wishes to answer it, just that Amy's going to be answering it right now. Ooh. Stay tuned. This story was very short. And I can see two kind of arguments on either side of whether this was a good thing because it was short or a bad thing because it was short. One side that I can see, and maybe you have a third side or a fourth or whatever, one side that I can see is it was short, but it still packed a lot into a very short span. And so for that reason it was good because it shows solid technique and ability and skill in being able to take a short amount of words and paragraphs and turn them into their own really good story.
Right.
The other side of the...
It, like an information dump, except not in the form of an information dump.
Correct. But the other side of that coin is we only have 5 stories for the main line of Kaldheim. And so because this story was so short, does that take away from the overall story of Kaldheim? Because if you're not getting a story that is twice as long as a normal short story would be for the Magic stories, which also may not be good in and of itself to just do that, but would you be missing out on and not doing enough justice to the story? Because if you're going to shorten it to 5 weeks, give us a full 5 weeks.
Okay.
But I'm asking, do you feel one way or another? Do you feel that there's a different way to look at it in terms of the length of this one?
As I said, I'm a short story fan. I like short stories because I don't like sitting around staring at the inside of my eyelids while you read descriptions to me.
Sure.
I like getting to the point
Sure.
a little bit more
Sure.
with it. And I like, kind of like you said, the skill behind what it takes to write a good short story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that it's a full story in and of itself, regardless of the fact that there's not a lot of words in there.
Right. And I saw Roy Graham on Twitter today, following the release of this story, talking about the fact that it was so short, or responding to some comments, not necessarily criticism, but comments that it was a very short story. And he said that he was, I'm paraphrasing here, but saying that he was aware of it, the fact that it was short, but that to have that kind of language or that kind of tone prattle on for too long would have gotten old fast.
Right.
And so I tend to be in the same camp as you and agreeing with the first of the two options that I brought up. And again, if there are other options, the comment section down below is what that's for. If you agree with the second option, whatever it happens to be. But I agree with the first option personally because I think that I walked away from this story not feeling like it was a waste of time.
Right.
And I don't mean because it was short, so it's like, who cares? It was whatever, but it took me 10 minutes to read it or 5 minutes to read it, so who cares? No, what I mean is I walked away from it enjoying it, having a lot to think about after the fact, and still having done it in a short period of time.
Right.
Which I appreciated because, time is money and all that, all those lovely phrases, etc. But regardless, it was nice to read a story, experience a lot from the story, and get a lot from it, even though it took a short period of time to read it. Mm-hmm. I'm a little salty, as we pointed out at the beginning, of the fact that you're releasing 2 stories a week, we're reviewing 2 stories of video, but you released 4 stories in 8 days,
right.
And then the 5th story that you released was super short, so that when we scrambled to try to do it quickly, or not quickly, that's not fair. When we scrambled to do it in a timely fashion to get the reviews out to everybody because we wanted to be able to do that we were slapped in the face because it's like, oh, thank God, we caught up, let's just review 1 this week, and then we'll be back to 2 a week next week, because spoilers, next Thursday, we'll be back to reviewing the side story from this coming Friday, and the regular story from next Wednesday. But then we get a short one as this week's.
It just kind of sucks because how it worked out,
Yes.
It didn't work out for us.
And again, that is, first world problems of like, oh man, it sucks that our show, that we're not sponsored to do in any way. Right. We don't have any inside information.
We're negatively affected by this, so it's inherently bad.
Right, exactly. And that's definitely not what I'm saying, because again, we really enjoyed it and I didn't have any negatives on the story itself.
Right. Because it's great.
Including the length of it. Because as we said, we believe that it wasn't that big of a deal, that it was a shorter story than, by a lot than usual.
Right.
And in fact, if you watch some of our reviews where we reviewed much longer stories, if they are not longer for a good reason, we call that out as well. So, there's a balance to be forged there.
Right.
But 2, if you're going to do a short story, this is how you do a very short story.
And so then it doesn't matter that it's short, right?
Correct.
Because sometimes there are very long stories, and sometimes you're affected by that length.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there going, oh my God, when is this going to end? And there are other times where it's a good enough story where you're just like, oh, it's over already, and then you look at the time and you go, oh, or you see how far down you scrolled, and you're like, Jesus, this was actually really long. It just didn't feel like it.
Yeah,
so
it turns out
it's about writing well.
Yeah.
It doesn't. The length isn't what is really the deal.
Right. That's not the measuring stick.
Right.
Where it's like, it's not this long, so it's not going to be good enough. It's only this long. No, turns out it doesn't matter. As Amy said, awesome pictures included in this one as well, just because the art of Kaldheim is insane, so all of them are probably going to be that way for us. But regardless, that's this week's story. It was very good. If you still haven't read it, I highly encourage you to do so. Again, even just that opening monologue.
Yeah.
So good. So we would love for you to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Join in on the discussion with us, with your fellow commenters, etc. I wasn't going to do it quite yet. I'll get there. Amy's like cocked and ready to go. Joining us in talking about a short story that's packed with flavor, telling us your opinions as to whether that's okay with you or whether it's not. Anything and everything in between is a great way to join us in showing off your...
Hashtag Porthos Pride.
That's right. We will be back next week with 2 more stories to review, a side story and a main story, so we are finally going to be able to actually do that. Do 1 and 1, which is what we were supposed to do all along, and yet this is side story number 3 and main story number 4 out of 5 each, it seems, from my understanding. So, you know, like maybe halfway there, but not really, is when we start doing it. But regardless, thank you so very much for watching. As we said, we would love to see you on our streams live Mondays and Fridays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. When I mentioned subscribing and ringing the bell, if you do that, you will get notifications whenever any of our videos come out or whenever we go live. So you will never miss any of those, although you now know exactly when they are.
Please come and talk to me.
Yeah! We release 3 videos a week on this channel, 3 videos a week on Video Games for All, and stay tuned to Gluten Free for All as well. Those 2 links are down in the description box below. You can go subscribe and ring the bells on those as well. Liking the videos, sharing them, all that stuff helps us out immensely. If you enjoy the stuff that we do, we enjoy that you are here with us. And so thank you for any and all support that you are willing to give. But for now, from us here at this Geek for All family of channels, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody!